Well, good day and welcome to you. It is October the 5th, and as always, I hope wherever you happen to be listening to this video, I hope you're having a fantastic day. Now, if you are new to Search for Signs, I would love to welcome you to this channel. My name is Gary Willing. If you have listened to a video or two or three or four in the past, well, I want to welcome you back as well. If you are new to this channel, here on this Search for Signs, we talk about the emergence of Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom. We take a deeper look at why are the Masters coming back now? Why is the teacher and the Masters coming back at this particular time? And of course, what does the return mean for you? If you are new, I would like to say this. You can listen to other videos I put up. Of course, you're all welcome to do that. But I do think that the best way to get the background information that you need to really know more about this information, to educate yourself better about it, even to see if there's any truth to it for yourself, is to check out the links that I provided in the description portion of this video. If you start at the Share International website, you will get more information in one spot than you can get anywhere else. Information about the background history of Maitreya and his emergence. Why the return of these masters is so important at this time. What does it mean for you? All the three questions that I asked, hypothetically in the beginning of this video, you can get answered by just going to the Share International website. You can also see images of miracles that have been going on for decades. You can read letters to the editor of people who have claimed to have had experiences with Maitreya. You can watch lectures by Benjamin Creme. You can read the very same articles that I like to read on this video series coming from one of the masters. You can read the very articles that I read, and then you can get a better sense of it because you're reading the words yourself and you're not just hearing me, recite it. So it's a great place to start. But there are other links in there too that talk about this information, and really you can educate yourself about the emergence of Maitreya in different ways. Anything from the George Adamski site talking about UFOs and his contacts with the UFOs to the teachings of J. Krishnamurti. So you can get a lot of different information, like I said, about this by just checking out those links. Hopefully you'll take advantage of it. It's free. But then you'll have a better sense of whether it's true for you or not. I always like to point out that I'm not trying to convince you of anything. I'm just kind of letting you know about some information that kind of came my way. So hopefully you'll look at it. Now, the other thing that I like about doing these videos is people comment. We can address the comments. A lot of times people ask questions, and of course you're welcome to ask a question if you want. And most people just post their question in the comment section. Of course, people just comment in the comment section. And then if it's pertinent and if it adds to the discussion, well, then we'll discuss it. And I always love it when people ask questions because it does help all of us, myself included, know and understand this information better. So hopefully you'll do that as well. I'm not claiming to be an authority and know all the answers to all the questions or even know the right answer to some of the most basic questions. I do my best, but it does help us understand this information better in the process. So, like I said, just kicking it out there to you. Now, the comment that somebody had posted that I want to address today is a very common comment. It's a very common concern, and he's addressing his comment, and I'll read it in a second, based on the last video that I put up, where in the background of the video, I have a picture of what I believe to be a message from Maitreya. I didn't take the picture. Somebody else that knows about this information took the picture, and she believes it's a message from Maitreya. It was written, it said, "So close now," with a little smiley face. And it was kind of like pastel chalk that was written on the sidewalk. There's always writing on the sidewalk. You walk down a city street or in your neighborhood and little kids draw on the sidewalk and so forth. But this, for her, kind of rang true. Like maybe, possibly it was Maitreya, So I believe it was. You might see it and say, it's probably not. That's fine. Now, this person was commenting on that, and he said, people have been saying that for years, nonstop, since I started following all this in 1982. That's a long time, isn't it? Maybe he's still coming, but at this point, I'm so over it, I don't know what to think. Maybe he changed his mind and is taking another course. Ben is gone, so who is to say now, right? And then I want to read a comment that a listener, commented back to this person. And Rick wrote, and I couldn't have explained it better myself, Ben claimed those predictions were based on windows of opportunity. and that the reappearance would happen eventually, whether we were ready or not. And then he commented back to what Rick said. I Stand for Marzipan wrote, well, on one level, I believe, and on another level, I'm just frustrated with the stagnation. We may have to wait for more years than we anticipated. So, a few things about this. Yes, we might have to wait a few more years. And your frustration, I believe, is natural. I don't think Benjamin Creme would have answered it like that. He would have answered it differently. But from my perspective, this is my channel. I can pretty much say whatever I want to say, as long as it's within the guidelines of YouTube, right? I think it's completely natural to be frustrated about this, as you put it, the stagnation, or that it's just taking this long, especially since you've known it a long time. The other thing I want to say is it's interesting that I get comments like this from time to time, from people who have known about this, maybe not as long as you have, but have known about it for quite a bit of time. I also get it from people who believe in their heart of hearts that Maitreya is the Antichrist. I also get that as well. So, I know, just a little interesting side note. Now, Rick is right. There was, the predictions that were made and given through Benjamin Creme that he gave out to the public were just that, windows of opportunity. There's a lot involved in an avatar of Maitreya's stature coming out into the public eye. Now, in the future, as avatars start to come out more and more, and these masters start to come out more and more, it won't be quite as tricky and challenging for them to do it, because humanity will pretty much already known about the masters. We'll already be working with the masters on some point, and therefore it won't be quite as difficult. So like in the next turn of the ladder, when Maitreya eventually leaves and goes on to higher work, and the next world teacher, who is the master who was John, the Master Kuthumi, he won't have to deal with all the stuff that Maitreya is dealing with. This is because humanity has forgotten all about the masters for eons, right? That it's taking so long. And even the teachers throughout the past, like, let's say Jesus, John the Baptist's job was to kind of let the people know that the world teacher was coming back. But he was talking to a very relatively few amount of people. So it was probably quite a bit easier to get the word out. For one thing, it was quite a bit easier to make his presence known, because he wasn't having to, John the Baptist didn't have to travel over the world, didn't have to let the Native Americans know, as well as people from India, people from Africa, he didn't have to do all that. It was just the people in Palestine, right? This environment is different. Now, one thing to also think about is just a little over 100 years ago, the original plan was that the masters were going to come back 1,200 years from now. That's when humanity would be ready. You see how quickly things can change? And the reason why it changed is because humanity defeated the Axis powers, was one. And two, right after that, we invented and discovered atomic energy. And of course, because humanity is rather violent, we of course found a wonderful weapon that we created from nuclear power and nuclear energy, the nuclear energy and harnessing the energy of the atom, I guess is a better way of saying it. And so that weapon could eventually destroy all life on the planet. That's why they had to come back as quickly as they did. Of course, humanity had to do three things. We had to have a measure of peace, which apparently we did. It might not look like it, but there had to have been a very tiny measure of peace. The principle of sharing had to start at least governing the minds of our world leaders, which I think that we're going to talk about the Marshall Plan. I think the Marshall Plan was really that key piece to Maitreya being able to come back, was when the United States instituted the Marshall Plan for that limited amount of time. And then lastly, and this is the hardest for me to recognize actually, is the political parties had to start cleaning house. I still think they're very corrupt, and there's just a tremendous amount of corruption in all the political houses, especially in the United States, but all around the world. But yet, on some level, they had to start cleaning house, and they did. I can't verify that, because if you asked Gary would say, that's nuts, but apparently they did. But so those three things had to happen. And then Maitreya slipped into London in 1977. But then, here's the other point of it. Okay, and this is the other point of what I was going to say is, when the masters were making, when Ben's master was making the prediction that Maitreya was about to come out, and Maitreya was making an announcement that he was ready to come out and so forth through Benjamin Creme. It was hoped that 1982 would be the earliest time that he could do it. I mean, of course, nothing with humanity is ever the earliest time. It's always way later than that, right? Because humanity's kind of slow, right? But when Ben made the announcement at the press conference, I think it was in 1982, that Maitreya was ready to come out, humanity just needed to do one thing, one little thing. Have a few journalists of note, of some kind of reputation, go into the Asian community of London where he was and seek him out. That was it. That's all they had to do. And there were a lot of, apparently, according to Ben, a lot of journalists of that reputation that could have done it, that believed it, still didn't do it. So that put back Maitreya's emergence, or him coming out on TV back for decades. And of course, there were times, and he eventually had to scrap that plan. And then it had to basically wait for humanity to be ready. Because had those journalists go into the Asian community of London, that would have signaled to Maitreya that humanity was ready. And so these masters don't do anything without it being within the law of free will. They don't infringe upon our free will at all, because that would harm us in the end. So they have to wait. From our perspective, especially if you've known this information as long as you have, it's frustratingly slow. But that, I don't think, has anything to do with Maitreya. It has to do with humanity. Now, fast forward it to just a few years ago when Benjamin Creme made the announcement that Maitreya had already spoken on TV. Okay? Of course, everyone went nuts. They thought it was Raj Patel, of course, which it wasn't. He didn't even fit the description of Maitreya, really. I mean, he looked Middle Eastern, and he was talking about social justice, but that was pretty much the extent of it. Even Benjamin Creme's master said that Maitreya's first interview was done in a panel. So he wasn't by himself. So Raj Patel's interview that everyone thinks is the first interview of Maitreya was not done in a panel of speakers. It was just him, right? But Maitreya, of course, is probably not using the language that you would think, that because he doesn't want to be recognized. He just wants to get his get his idea out in a little way, and then another little way, and then another little way, and another, small way, rather than just dumping it on us. Think of it like feeding pigeons in the park, just a little bit of bread. You don't throw the whole loaf at them, just a little bit of bread at a time. That's what Maitreya is doing on TV. But, I know people who have recognized him. I have a suspect myself, whether it's him or not, I don't know. But, it's not for any one of us to tell any other person that that's Maitreya or that's not Maitreya. We have to discover it on ourselves, by ourselves. And if you go back a few videos, there was a person who was a fundamentalist Christian was talking about this verse from Matthew, where Matthew said, if someone says the Christ is in the desert and points in the desert, don't go there. Don't follow, don't believe them. And they were saying that was kind of what Benjamin Creme was doing. He was telling him, hey, the Christ is in the desert, that kind of thing. That's not what I think Matthew was talking about. He was talking about people saying that person's the Christ. See, we're not supposed to do that. We're supposed to recognize the Christ within ourselves, for ourselves. And so that's why I think Benjamin Creme made, also along with the announcement of talking about Maitreya, he's also said for years, it's not for any one of us to point out that that's Maitreya on TV. Now, the Maitreya might be speaking totally different than you think he would be speaking. But the other thing, too, I want to say, Stan, and for others who have the same concern, is it might be because humanity is just not ready to hear it yet. And if you look at, you kind of step back and look at the way life is, right, on planet Earth, I could see why. There's a lot of distractions. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of hatred toward one another. There's a lot of divisions. And if he just kind of came out there and started talking the way he was doing, it might make matters worse. So he might be doing it because humanity is at the place that we're at, right? So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of your concern I want to address is when we all just sit on our hands and do nothing and wait, of course you're going to get frustrated, get burned out and tired of it and everything like this. But if you're neck deep in the service of it, and whether it's making Maitreya known to people or working on his priorities, whether that's the ending of hunger or bringing about peace and justice or helping to save the environment, you're not so concerned about it. You're just kind of there, and it will eventually happen when it happens. Benjamin Creme was not a grifter. He didn't ask for money. So what was his intention for saying what he said? He got nothing but smacked down by people. Nobody looked up to him. I mean, there was a small group of people who looked up to him, but for the most part, the public did not like what Benjamin Creme had to say. He wasn't making any money off of it. He wasn't getting rich off of it. His paintings weren't selling more because he was talking about it. In fact, they were probably selling less because of it. And yet he continued year after year after year after year after year, continued to talk about it. Why? What was his intention? And so I'm assuming from my perspective, because I knew the man, his intention was because he actually was saying what he saw was true and how important it was for people to know it. That's why he did what he did. And in time, I believe he'll be proved right. The other thing I want to say is, and this might not help, it might not, but, people such as myself have had experiences with Maitreya and have talked about it. Now I'm willing to go out on YouTube and talk about it a lot, right? Other people just wrote it into Share International and that was it for them. But if you go to the Share International website and read some of the stories and experience some of the teachings that Maitreya is already starting to give out through, ordinary people, some of this stuff is life-changing if you really look at it. I mean, the things that Maitreya said to me from over the years, I've looked back at it and it's changed my life the way that's happened. But some of the experiences that I've had have just been crazy. And I look back at some of those experiences. Did they really happen? Like I fell off a ladder, and I talk about it in a video that I put up in February of 2020. But I was working on a ladder on the side of my house. The ladder fell. I was falling right toward the driveway. I was falling at, of course, the speed that you would fall off a ladder, right toward the concrete, until I yelled out Maitreya. And then I stopped in midair and was gently laid down, just as gentle as a mother laying down her baby for the first time into a crib. I mean, it was just that gentle and caring. And when I was on the concrete, I had no bruises, no bumps. My jeans weren't scraped, nothing, no abrasions, nothing. And I sat there for a minute because I had no idea what happened. It was just surreal. And then I got up and I literally felt better than I did before I fell off the ladder. I felt like, I don't know, healthier. My neck actually wasn't quite as serious. I must have knocked something loose. But no, seriously. And so I look back at those experiences that even I had, and I question them because I'm like, did that really happen? That's crazy. And then look at the payphone story that I had. If you listen to that, I mean, that was just crazy. Now, this is me. You don't know me, Stan, but these experiences aren't just happening to me. They're happening to other people as well. And so for me, it leaves me no doubt that Maitreya is who Benjamin Creme and who I think he is. But more importantly, here's the other thing. You look historically at some of the things that Maitreya said. Without sharing, there could be no justice. Without justice, there could be no peace. Without peace, there could be no future. If you look at that, and you look at the historical piece, and I even have a video about the Marshall Plan, even though they don't talk about it from this perspective, you can get some background information about the Marshall Plan by checking out the link in the description. If you go back there and you look at it, and just ask yourself, did England and France and Germany and Portugal and Spain and Italy and the United States and Holland, did they have a great goodwill, trusting relationship before they started the Marshall Plan? No. Germany was trying to take over Europe for several decades. France was against, had several wars and that happened over the centuries with England and so forth. England, the United States, and vice versa. There was a time when England actually was in Washington, D.C. and burnt down parts of Washington, D.C. The War of 1812. It's in the historical books, history books, right? But since the Marshall Plan, 70 years ago, after it stopped, has any of that happened? No. You know what I'm saying? So if you look at just what some of the teachings of Maitreya, it will probably be more real for you, especially if you start to apply it, start to look at it. That's why I think this channel is so important for people such as yourself who have heard of this information and have thought it's kind of died on the vine. It isn't. It's very much alive. And it starts with the teachings. It's, if you listen to the master's articles that I read and go and read them yourself on sharing that, they become alive to you again. And I do recommend checking it out. So hopefully that addressed that concern. But I say that I understand it. I can relate from, a little bit, but, it'll be okay. And in time, whenever the time is right for you, you'll recognize Maitreya on TV. And then there will be a point where we'll all recognize him on TV because he's going to come out and claim that he isn't. But also, too, real quick before I get to this last part, you're right. The plans do change. And maybe they have been pushed back because of the world events. But it doesn't mean that it's going to last forever. It just means that it's just delayed a little bit from our perspective. But from the master's point of view, from Maitreya's point of view, things are moving at a lightning pace. So, and Benjamin Creme's master writes about it all the time. So I want to read this article, Change Towards Unity, that was written in 2011. It's not too long ago, by Benjamin Creme's master. And this kind of talks about what's going on and how fast the changes are from the perspective of the masters. From our perspective, it's like watching a rock change color. I don't know. When men eventually take stock of their present situation, they must surely admit that all is not well for humanity. Political, economic, social, environmental conditions are filled with problems which test the resources of all the countries to the limit. Even those countries which seem to be economically dominant at the present time have problems which deny them the ease their wealth implies. What is preventing the nations from achieving a degree of balance and well-being? Why do even old, rich, and experienced nations plunge suddenly into chaos and strife? Why the pain and struggle for so many? What prevents a greater sense and expansion of unity? The answers to these questions are many and varied, but the single inclusive factor is the time, the moment in this Earth's history in which they are being asked. This time is like none other in the history of the world. The changes taking place are momentous, beyond human comprehension, and will alter life as we know it, profoundly and forever. On every plane, these changes are taking place, some slowly, even in the very fabric of the Earth's crust, others in a growing momentum which challenges men's capacity for correct response. Useless in this context are the tired ideas of backward-looking politicians, steeped in the glamours of position and power. Today, it is the people who are ahead of their leaders and are voicing aloud their understanding and needs. In country after country, the voice of the people is becoming more focused and distinct. Millions are now educated and sure of their needs, peace, work, and hope for their future. A growing sense of unity, too, is beginning to inform their expectations and demands. They know they are not alone in the world, but have millions of brothers and sisters everywhere, with the same problems and needs. In this way, even if unaware of his presence and teachings, they are responding to Maitreya's energy and influence, and building the framework of the future. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.